Who do you want to talk about first?
Mitch Sherman, The Athletic.
He can play. And we need people that can play.
And we'll never be royal. Let me live that fantasy.
Mitch Sherman, The Athletic. On the Connor Happer Show. On 1620, The Zone.
He can play.
All right, well, the theme song, it feels good today. I'm trying to couch my really diving headfirst in as long as I possibly can. But as Mitch Sherman of The Athletic is well of the understanding, the Royals don't usually have good Aprils, so this is putting me in a bit of a different position right now as he joins us on the 42 Degrees Source Hotline. Mitch, good morning. How are you?
I'm well. I was just having a discussion with a fellow Royals fan about our need now suddenly to get to Kansas City to attend a game, and going to have to look at the schedule. And I mentioned that I might have to wait until after the Nebraska spring game, which is on April 27th, just because then maybe my calendar will open up a bit. And the response that I received was, that's putting an awful lot, because we want to do this when the Royals are, still relevant. You know, it's great to go to a Royals game when they're over 500. It just adds to the experience. And the response, of course, if we're going to wait till April 27th, which is all of 2 weeks from Saturday, that's going to put an awful lot of pressure on the Royals to keep this going. I don't know if that's realistic, Connor. What do you think?
It's a really good way to look at it, because that's basically the position that they have now put us in. Like, you're asking for, like, can we get one more week? Can we get one more week? And after that week, can we get one more week where it's sort of interesting? And I don't know if that's sustainable for like 30 whatever weeks of the baseball season, but I'm here now, so it's begun.
It's kind of like Royals fans are kind of like Nebraska basketball fans, where you're just waiting, when things are going well, and it's like, wow, it's December and they're like 11-2, and then you see some projections that start to come out, and they're going to make the NCAA tournament. It's like, no. When is this thing gonna, like, completely just fall apart? And and then you get to February, and no, it's going to happen. But I'm kind of still in that, like, November, December basketball mode here with the baseball season. I don't know if I trust it. I mean, you're starting pitching. They can't have the best starting pitching in Major League Baseball for 6 months. That is in no way realistic.
It's impossible. There's no chance of that. Yeah. But I'm enjoying the ride right now, even if it's only been 11 games or whatever it is.
Maybe the Astros is good, whether you're 2-9 or 10-4, whatever. But
okay, yeah. I like that. So they always say, like, there's 50. If you split up the baseball season into thirds, there's a third of the games that you're going to win, a third of the games you're going to lose, and a third of the games that'll determine how good of or bad of a season you have. And I think the Royals won a game last night that is in the third that they weren't going to win. So you're like you're just stealing from the other piles at this point, which is, I mean, once again, very, very different. My podcast co-host, Mitch Sherman, joining us now on the 42 Degrees of Source Hotline. We're excited to bring that to you, by the way, just a quick detour on that. So we're doing it every day. So Mitch and I have already talked for 30 minutes about Nebraska football this morning. And so I think we're going to have a good sense of where our brains are at. These conversations will still be good, but you could check us out on the Locked On podcast, Mitch.
That was just a primer this morning. Now we're really talking.
Okay, so let's piggyback on one of those topics, quarterback play, as everybody got to take a look, at least a little bit of some guys throwing it around the yard yesterday. Everybody's takeaway seems to have been that Daniel Kaelin kind of looks the part so far. Like, how much do we read into, first of all, that little of what we saw, but also what it could potentially mean for a quarterback race or any other position race, I guess, at this point?
I'm sure if somebody, let's say you're a coach and you're hearing the banter today, or you're somebody, equipment manager, somebody who's knowledgeable about the game, and has seen this team practice 7 or 8 times, and the takeaways start to come out from the media that was inside the Hawk Center for all of like 20 minutes on Tuesday. You just got to be thinking, wow, you know, that's an awful. We saw an awful small piece of what has happened, even in just this small piece of the off season. I mean, 7 or 8 practices in the spring is it's like half the spring, but it's still a very small. I mean, you're going to do that in a week and 2 days in camp in August, and then that's just like the precursor, the lead up to the first game. So it's a really small bit of a really small bit, and yet I think there's renewed optimism that Nebraska doesn't just have one young quarterback who is positioning himself to be able to make an impact on this program, that it might in fact have 2. And maybe there were some in the Nebraska universe who perhaps took Daniel Kaelin for granted a bit because he was a local kid and wanted to come to Nebraska from the beginning, and you know, ended up in Lincoln in, I'd say, unusual circumstances, like committed to Missouri because it looked like Dylan Raiola was going to be a part of the class, and then Dylan wasn't going to be a part of the class, and then Dylan became a part of the class very late in the process, and at that point, Danny Kaelin didn't have other good options. If Dylan had rejoined or had joined Nebraska like in October, we might not see Daniel Kaelin, and maybe we would. Maybe at that point he was so excited about the prospect of being in Lincoln that it was happening no matter what. But it's possible. It's great for Nebraska that they got both of these guys, and they are both elite quarterbacks, and at the high school level. I mean, Danny Kaelin, you know, he's from Bellevue West. I think if he was from Austin, Texas, or Houston, Texas, maybe we would view him here a little bit differently. You know, don't take him for granted. He was one of the better high school quarterbacks in the country last season, and he's practicing like that, at least from the small sample we saw in Lincoln.
Let me ask the kind of battle, the two-headed battle between those two this way. Assuming that we're, you know, still barreling down the path of Dylan Raiola being Nebraska's starting quarterback this year, which I don't think we have much reason to believe that it won't be at this point. Does that change? At least I think it does from the fan base's perspective. Does it change the kind of, I guess, leash on Dylan Raiola, or the framework in which the fan base maybe views that quarterback situation?
I hadn't really thought of that. There's going to be pressure on a starting quarterback, no matter who he is, and what the situation is that he walks into. You can certainly envision a scenario where Dylan Raiola, as expected, earns the starting job at Nebraska, and, you know, doesn't play like a Heisman Trophy finalist in the first month of the season. He's a true freshman, okay, and 5-star, whatever. I mean, it's there's going to be bumps, undoubtedly, and they won't all be his fault. But the quarterback often takes the brunt of the criticism and the praise when that comes, when good or bad things happen. And I'd imagine, yes, there will be. Should they give Daniel Kaelin an opportunity? You know, Dylan threw an incomplete pass. He was intercepted. Is it time to look at Daniel Kaelin? So I would just throw some caution out there that we should be patient with both of these guys, and the coaches are going to see them a lot more than what we do as media and as people, you know, fans, people observing the program. They're going to have a good idea based on 15 practices here this spring, and then another 25 to 30 in August before somebody has to walk out there against UTEP and take the first rep. And it's probably best to give that starting quarterback some patience, to afford him some patience, because if it's one of these two guys, if it's Dylan Raiola, he's 19 years old, and Daniel Kaelin is in the same boat.
Agreed. Mitch Sherman of The Athletic is with us. I wanted to ask you about your conversation with Mike Minter, who's a former Husker great and had spent the last decade coaching at Campbell before stepping down now, and he was at the coaching clinic for over the weekend, and you caught up with him on a variety of different things, including Dylan Raiola, who he had a very interesting, perspective on. I guess, what'd you, the big quote was the comparison to Patrick Mahomes in that conversation, but a lot of this stuff is pretty good and enlightening from Minter.
Yeah, I didn't say to Mike Minter, do you think Dylan Raiola is like Patrick Mahomes? He brought that up. He brought it up. We were talking about Matt Rule and the need for Nebraska to continue to recruit talent and what he saw in Rule. And he made the comment that Nebraska is not going to lose because it gets out coached. And that was a compliment for Rule. And he said, Nebraska is going to lose games when it does, because the other team has more talent. And then he said, but here in year one, the first opportunity that he gets to go out and put together a full recruiting class, Matt Rule gets the number one quarterback in the country. And I understand that he's got Nebraska ties, but you still have to beat Georgia in a recruiting battle, which is not easy to do no matter the player. And so then I said, so since you're talking about Dylan Raiola, what do you think about Dylan Raiola? And he launched into this comparison to Patrick Mahomes and said he's better than Patrick Mahomes was at this stage of his development. And Patrick Mahomes was under the radar as a recruit out of Texas, and that's part of why he ended up at Texas Tech and not Texas or Alabama or LSU or Oklahoma. And he proved everyone wrong. If he was a 3 or a 4-star prospect, he wasn't a 5-star like Raiola. So it's not revolutionary to say that Raiola is at a higher level than Mahomes was when they were 18 years old, but it's still eye-opening, and it's still a tremendous compliment, and it's still coming from somebody who's been a head coach at the Division I level for the last 11 years. And, he doesn't necessarily have the same need that Marcus Satterfield would, or Glenn Thomas would, or Matt Rule would, to just play it easy, take it easy, be cautious and slow with the way that you very, very deliberate in all the words that you use to describe Dylan. I don't think that Glenn Thomas is going to make the Matt Ryan comparison with Dylan Raiola at any point here in his freshman year. But he may be thinking it behind the scenes. They may watch him and think, wow, this guy's got an incredible skill set. But that was interesting from Minter, and along with his comments about the Nebraska defensive staff, Tony White, Evan Cooper, and how impressed he was with the way that they get guys in position to make plays.
Could Jamal Banks be, we're still a long ways away from playing a game here, but Nebraska's had a halfway decent run here of getting some wide receivers out of the transfer portal to fill needs. It feels like the early impressions on Banks is that he fits right into that category of now different types of players, obviously, but we're talking about Trey Palmer and we're talking about Samori Toure. Like it feels like Jamal Banks has the look of being Nebraska's or one of Nebraska's top guys at that spot this year.
Yeah, those two guys went from Nebraska straight to from 1 year at Nebraska into the NFL. And that's obviously the goal for Jamal Banks. That's why he's left Wake Forest to come get a new set of eyes on him and to get coached up and to play in a place that can help showcase him and get him to the NFL. And he's got the physical tools for sure to get there. And I think that it's realistic to think in part because Nebraska's done it with players at that position multiple times, that he can follow that path. I also think there's a chance that Isaiah Nair can follow that path. And his career has been different than Banks in that he hasn't put up the consistent numbers, and he's dealt with more injuries and sat the last 2 years at Texas, but he's got it in him to have a season like he did at Wyoming in 2021. And if you do that at Nebraska as a senior, and we saw a glimpse of it in the open period of practice on Tuesday, then he could be that guy. So I think it's really big for the young Nebraska receivers, and there's a whole group of them that either played as true freshmen last year or redshirted, and now are going to be relied on to be key pieces in this offense or depth pieces. It's really big for them that they don't have to step onto that stage and be and be the premier players at their position in their second years in the program. I think that potentially could hinder the development of a guy like Malachi Coleman or Jalen Lloyd if you needed him to catch 70 passes. But they don't. They can just continue to grow at their own pace and be great players in their own right and use the guidance of guys like Banks and Nair to become big time contributors and eventually be like wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, but that may not be in 2024.
All right, Mitch, great stuff as always. We'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Connor.
Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Nebraska said way too much of that. Freshmen come in and they maybe have some big recruiting rankings attached to them or whatever it might be, and we say, oh, well, that guy needs to slot right in right away, and he needs to, in order for Nebraska to have a successful season, he's going to have to catch this many balls for 800 yards or 500 yards or whatever it might be. Same thing with the running back spot. I see a whole running back. That guy's going to come in and tote the rock. He's going to have 700, 800, 1,000 yards right away. Even though, Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd got that experience last year, it's still advantageous, I think, for their development that they don't have to shoulder all of that, right? Even in their second year. They had to shoulder a lot of it in the back half of last year with all the injuries that Nebraska's had. But maybe it doesn't have to quite be as heavy with the addition of those two transfers. Because early, once again, spring overreactions. But those two portal receivers seem to kind of be hits, it seems like. And I think people were pretty sure about Banks right away and maybe less sure about Nair just because of what he hasn't done over the last couple of years. But the early returns on him seem to be very, very good as well. All right, we'll come back. Don't forget to get your questions in for the tweet bag. Got a couple here on the text line, which is good. Twitter, send those in, and that will be your chance to win $50 to Cops Pizza. You can have a feast for $50 to Cops Pizza, baby. So you're gonna want to get those questions in at Happer Show coming up at the top of the hour. But first, the odd news next on 1620 The Zone.